Bienvenue à Paris et à les années folles, the crazy years. If you are one of these people who are coming into Paris, coming to France in the 1920s, you are one of hundreds of thousands of Americans who did so. In the 1920s, Americans came to Paris in droves. The 1926 census showed that there were just under 18,000 Americans living in France, and over 9,000 of those were living in Paris. And that's not to mention the hundreds of thousands that are believed to have been undocumented. In one year, 250,000 Americans came to France. 2 out of every 100 were millionaires because it was a great place to spend money. It was cheap if you had dollars. Americans were the 6th largest group after Belgians, Italians, Russians, Swiss, and British. Everybody was coming to Paris. It was an incredible cross-section of society. Paris was the heart of the continent, and it always had a friendliness for art and literature, particularly the arts as they express themselves on the edges. Nietzsche, who died in 1900, already understood this, and he said that as an artist, a man has no home in Europe save Paris. But what about us Americans? Why did we come to Paris? In 1960, Walter Cronkite did an episode of his show 20th Century. And he did an episode on Paris in the 1960s. And he said this: American artists fleeing Babbittry, bootleggers, and boom came to breathe the free air of Paris. They came fleeing the cultural desert of America. My theory about America is that we are a nation of extremes. And in the 20s, that was absolutely typified as we were living through the puritanical victory over alcohol, while at the same time experiencing the excesses of the boom afforded by the stock market craze. Some people didn't want any part of this. Due to prohibition, violence was increasing, and many came to France, to Paris, for a better quality of life. I think that a good example are Sarah. They were extremely wealthy couple, and they left America, and they thought really for good in 1921. And this is what Gerald wrote. He wrote, "There was something depressing about a country that could pass the 18th Amendment. The country was tightening up, and it was unbecoming. It was, I suppose, the tone of life in America that we all found so uncongenial." I don't know about you, but I don't know. It feels there's something very immediate about those words, and I can really relate to them. Gerald and Sarah Murphy, while we're really familiar with lots of people from what we call the lost generation, figures like the Fitzgeralds and the Hemingways and others, we often don't hear a lot about Sarah and Gerald Murphy. And they had a profound influence on that period and on what that period produced. For example, they were the inspiration for Dick and Nicole Driver in F. Scott Fitzgerald's Tender as a Night. Picasso was a great friend of theirs. And if you've ever see a picture, a Picasso painting of a woman with pearls on the beach, that's Sarah Murphy. He loved using her as a model, and she loved wearing her pearls at the beach because she thought that they needed the sunshine. At Yale, Gerald encouraged Cole Porter to write songs for plays, and they were lifelong friends. If you've seen The Lovely, that couple that's with them all the time, that's the Murphys. And there's a wonderful picture of the Porters and the Murphys in Venice. And there's a even more fantastic picture of Cole Porter in a swimsuit at the beach with a swimming cap and wearing Sarah's pearls. I like the Murphys a lot, and as preparing for this, I really got to know them. And I think when I imagine myself living in the 1920s in Paris, it's their lifestyle I imagine. So that's why we're going to begin tonight at their apartment. They lived on the left bank. They had an apartment on the left bank on the edges of the Luxembourg Gardens. Down the street were the Fitzgeralds. A short walk through the gardens, sort of northeast, you'd come to Shakespeare and Company, the English bookshop run by Sylvia Beach and her partner, Adrienne Monnier. If you stepped just out of their house and walked a few yards forward, you'd be at the apartment of Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. 18-minute walk east through the gardens were the Hemingways, though probably the Hemingways would come to them more than they go to the Hemingways, because the Murphys were great hosts and they held wonderful cocktail parties. And I'll read to you, Gerald loved mixing cocktails, and I'll just read to you a description that his son-in-law wrote about what it was like to be at one of their parties. The Murphy Cocktail Hour was a unique production. As the hour approached, Sarah would place on the bar small Steuben pitchers of orange, lemon, and lime juice, always fresh. This man didn't mix drinks, he performed an office. He looked like a chemist or a magician, measuring, mixing, holding up to the light, garnishing, and finally serving with a flourish. His opinion was that he loved drinking, but disliked drunks. He mixed a batch of drinks one evening, and as they watched the sunset from the terrace, Gerald remarked that this drink has gone straight to my head, which is what I intended it to do. So I hope that the drinks tonight will go straight to your head. One of the things, he loved mixing drinks and creating drinks, and whenever people would ask him, Gerald, what's in this drink? He'd say, oh, just the juice of a few flowers. So he actually created a drink called the juice of a few flowers, and it's in his notes. And I actually saw a picture of it. It's his own handwriting, and every once in a while he would send these recipes to friends. So tonight, our first cocktail is going to be the juice of a few flowers that was created by the wonderful, wonderful Gerald Murphy that they would inevitably have served in their apartment on the left bank. You start with dry gin. Gonna get that from the freezer. It's the best place to keep your gin. Now, people talk a lot about expensive gins and stuff. I like Trader Joe's. It's a Trader Joe's gin. They do a London dry gin, but most gin really is dry at this point, unless you're buying Old Tom. You want to put some ice in your shaker. And you want an ounce of gin. I'm making 2, so there'll be 2 ounces. And I don't have any Steuben pitchers, but I do have these little vintage glasses with all our juices. It's an ounce of orange juice, half an ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce of lime juice, and an ounce of grapefruit juice. It's what you might call a morning cocktail. Want to take that? and let that sit for a while. Take lemon, rub it against the edges of your glass. And I've got here some coarse sugar. I bought some decorating sugar. Put your glass in that. Same here. About glasses, I just don't think there were really standard glasses. People used sort of what they had or what was pretty. So I've used some late 19th century ones. You want to strain it because if you use fresh juice, you may have bits of pulp. And because you've shaken it, you get that lovely little, that lovely foam. To your health.